hope you can feel that music filling you up. It's almost like that water rising in Karen's story, except it's buoyant and it's hopeful. I'm so grateful to have master improvisers with us this morning, because that's really what I want to talk to you about in some way. I'm surprised none of our staff said, well, it depends on the day where I put myself on this continuum. I wonder where you would put yourself on the continuum from that place of I control my own destiny all the way to I believe forces beyond my control determine my destiny. It might, as I was just saying, depend on the day or the month or the year. The very day we receive or get a diagnosis, we might feel like a leaf blown in the wind of our genetics. Then a year into remission, we may feel that our response to treatment means that we can handle anything life throws at us. Many of us have learned this life lesson that our staff shared. We can't control what happens to us. We can only control how we respond to what happens. The musician responds to the notes or chords or silence or rhythm of the one who played before them. It's a core understanding for me, and it's personal for me. It's very much a part of my inheritance. Rabbi Elias in Lithuania passed it down to my grandfather Simon, who passed it down to my dad, who passed it down to us. This story, this wisdom that it's not what happens to us that matters, it's what we do with it that matters. Now, Rabbi Elias knew something. He knew quite a bit, actually, about things being beyond his control. He lived during the time of the pogroms in Eastern Europe, and finally decided to try to escape the violence by moving his elderly mother, his young wife, and his 2 babies to the United States of America. Now, the authorities on Ellis Island held his mother back because of an infection in her eye, and she died on Ellis Island at the turn of the last century. Elias, my great-grandfather, became the first rabbi to lead a congregation in New Haven, Connecticut, and he died in 1925, strangely enough, of influenza, which they called back then the old man's best friend. Elias and his wife had 10 more children born in the United States, 10 boys and 2 girls in all, and one of them was my grandfather, Simon, or Cy, as he was called. So I'm asking myself this morning, and ask you to ponder also, was the rabbi's choice faithful? And if so, what was it faithful to? We're wondering this together this morning because faith is our theme for September. They had to have been very, very afraid. Living with that kind of violent hatred must have felt unbearable. Also, I imagine that facing the limits of his power and influence as a man with a designated role in a community must have been uncomfortably humbling and difficult to bear. I imagine also that abandoning his flock in Lithuania must have broken his heart. And it would have been terrifying to risk his own life and the lives of everyone in his family that way. His mother's death, as a result of his decision, his mother's death alone, must have been incredibly hard to live with the rest of his life. But beyond fear and humility and anxiety and sadness and brokenheartedness, he must also have had tremendous trust in himself when he traded in almost every frame or structure he had ever used to make meaning of his life. Community and culture, language and leadership, tradition and roots. He let them all go with no control over the outcome. Talk about improvisation. As Buddhist teacher Sharon Salzberg says, faith, in contrast to belief, is not a definition of reality, not a received answer, but an active, open state that makes us willing to explore. Faith comes from within, from our active participation in the process of discovery. It seems like circumstances today are pushing more and more of us emotionally and psychologically towards the forces greater than me are definitely determining my destiny side of things. It's interesting that in my memory, 9 years or so ago, when we first did this with the staff we had then, many more of us were on the I control my own destiny side. What I remember is that more of our Black American staff were on the I don't have control side, while most of our staff who identify as white were on the I do have control side. When you stop and think about it, it's a very white American thing to believe that we control our fate and that we have the right to control the destiny of other people's lives. We're familiar with our American imperialist ideologies and the old pull yourself up from your bootstraps mythology. What this means to me is that these unbearably uncomfortable feelings of uncertainty we're experiencing these days can, if we let them, open those of us who have lived our lives with white skin privilege and class privilege to a new understanding of what it feels like not having control over one's destiny. These are significant, helpful new frames for our times. You can try them on with me at home if you want. I'm not only losing certainty, I'm gaining understanding of the radical unpredictability of life, which so many people in Oklahoma and in this country and around the world feel and experience and live every day. These challenging times are really inviting us to reframe our faith from within, so we can be active participants with other people in the process of discovery that's happening today. Faith fits right in the uncomfortable spaces in between created by COVID-19, the Black Lives Matter movement, and the upcoming election. Belief clings. Faith lets go. That comes from Alan Watts. Now, you might be thinking with me, let go? Now? Really? Are you kidding? Honestly, I confess I find faith challenging. It's so hard to stay open and curious and flexible when I didn't cause it, I can't control it, and I can't cure it. Like when we're watching a loved one struggle with addiction, it's torture. Or watching leaders across the country right now struggling to protect our constitutional democracy, it's torture. Or observing and knowing that I'm participating in species extinctions and climate change, it's torture. And observing and knowing I'm participating in the pain, deaths, and destruction caused by systemic racism, it's torture. It's unbearable a lot of the time. And yet here we are in this sanctuary this morning with these master improvisers. And I couldn't help but wonder where our musicians would choose to place themselves on our continuum. It's been wonderful to get to know them just a little bit and hear them warming up and talk to them about their music. Most of them, if not all of them, I'm not sure, are classically trained, and yet they choose They choose to improvise, and they find such joy in improvising. It gives all of us joy. They seem to practice letting go of control, creativity, and trust. They're responsive and not reactive. They're flexible and fun. They seem to practice surrendering and tap into some well of ingenuity. I'm tempted to say this morning that it even takes faith for them to do what they do, faith in their own musical ability and in each other as musicians. So I offer you another reframe. We are no longer living in a classical container where we can predict the outcome. We know well how that sounds. Bravo, bravo. Instead, we are living in an era that is asking us to identify, listen closely now, to identify our core or our chord values so we can respond with curiosity and openness to absolutely whatever arises.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what my great-grandfather must have felt so many years ago. He must have felt great fear. But I choose to believe that it was his love of life that allowed him to let go of everything he thought his life was about and trust that there would be something for him to contribute in the new world. Because when we didn't cause it, and we can't control it, and we can't cure it, we can still choose to contribute our best to it. I'll tell you why I'm recommending the path of faith this morning. Number one, because it's too exhausting mentally, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually to try to control the things we can't change. And number two, because it's too depressing and disempowering and actually detrimental to our work in the world to believe we have no power and can't make any lasting or meaningful changes. The third way is to walk faithfully in the world, not knowing, but still going. Like toddlers learning to walk. We may feel awkward and fall down a lot. I'm imagining these musicians at times in their improvisation sessions get a little frustrated, feel a little frustrated. They're nodding yes, that's good to know. But with time and practice, we learn how. Just last week, I went for a walk with my friend. This is a true story. We walk weekly along the river, and I was wearing my regular glasses that help me see. It was drizzling, though, so they were getting all wet, and they were not helping me see, so I took them off, and I had them in my hand with my keys, my car keys, because I drive to the river, and the dog leash, because my daughter's living with me, and she brought her dog from Chicago. It was a little cumbersome, and just as I got to the car and looked down for my keys, I saw that I didn't have my glasses. And for a moment, I panicked, and I turned to my friend, and I was like, I don't have my glasses. And we were both out of time. She had to get to work. I had to get to work. But I wasn't going anywhere without my glasses. So we moved towards the path, and we stood still for a second, looked each other in the eye, started making a plan to go to either ends of our walk and meet in the middle, which is right when I looked down into the wet grass and found my glasses. Sometimes the new frames we need to renew our faith are really close to us. They might be as close as our family or our friends or maybe our church. I invite you to experiment with different frames this week. Make sure they're big enough to make space for all your doubts and all your fears and all your feelings, more than just your fear. Because faith is a paradox. To truly question, you must truly have faith. Who knows, you may find yourself improvising a little bit more this week or even this year. I'm sure those of you who are schooling your children at home find yourself improvising a little more. Perhaps you'll find yourself expressing your love and your longing a little bit more instead of being controlled by your rage or your feelings of impotence, despite it all, or maybe because of it all. I'll leave you today with Barack Obama's description of faith, which comes from his inaugural address in 2009. There is something truly eternal about faith. It is ultimately the faith and determination of the American people upon which this nation relies. It is the kindness to take in a stranger, the firefighter's courage to storm a stairway filled with smoke, and also a parent's willingness to nurture a child that finally decides our fate. Our challenges may be new, but those values upon which our success depends, hard work and honesty, courage and fair play, tolerance and curiosity, loyalty and patriotism, these things are old. These things are true. What is demanded now, then, is a return to these truths. What is required of us now is a new era of responsibility, a recognition on the part of every American that we have duties to ourselves, our nation, and our world. Duties that we do not grudgingly accept, but rather seize gladly, firm in the knowledge that there is nothing so satisfying to the spirit, so defining of our character, than giving all to a difficult task. This is the price and promise of citizenship. This is the source of our confidence this Labor Day weekend, the knowledge that God calls on us to shape an uncertain destiny. May it be so. I have faith in you and in all of us. Amen.